think everybody that has come tonight is going to be thankful that they did when you see what we have in store for you. So the very first thing we're going to start off with is a nice little video. So this is actually a video of your pastor riding a donkey. We were, you can barely see me riding off now there. We had a whole, there was a whole lot of trouble of people getting up on one donkey that I didn't show in the video. And then Kim was helping out somebody else. But I promised the pastor that this is going to show up every so often during church service when he puts a video up. I just haven't talked to Ted to get that queued up yet, so I wanted everybody to see that tonight. So where we're going to start is we're going to continue with our discussion around water and the importance of water in Israel. And we're going to start at Jericho. And I think we all know the story of Jericho. And Jericho is not far from the Dead Sea. And in fact, here's a picture of Jericho. And off to the right, at the very far corner, you can just barely see a little tip of water right there. That is the Dead Sea. And we'll have another picture here in a minute where you can actually see the Dead Sea from Jericho. This is actually a picture that I had taken as we were riding up the cable car from down below to the top of the Mount of Temptation. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But we got to take a cable car ride up. And Jericho is kind of interesting because it is considered an oasis. So there is water supply in Jericho. And the pastor's going to talk about En-Gedi in a little while, which is another spring source that's near the Dead Sea. But Jericho also has the oldest known man-made structure that is still standing today. And I have a picture of that from where we were able to look down on it. We did not actually get to walk up to that structure while we were there. And it's also the oldest continuously inhabited place on earth. Oldest continuously inhabited place. It is a Palestinian territory, which is kind of interesting as you come in. This is a mosque that you see there in Jericho, and you can just barely make out some of the fence area right here. So when we start talking about, we're going to have one night where we talk about a little bit of the geopolitical landscape and kind of what that means to Israel and Palestinian and Israeli conflicts. But as you drive in, you have to pass through a checkpoint to go into Jericho. As you go up on the cable car right outside of the city, this is where there are areas of excavation where they're doing active archaeological digs around areas of the oldest man-made structure. Now, what was interesting, our guide was telling us, and you can look up some of this information online, they have found 15 sets of walls at Jericho. 15 different sets of walls at Jericho that at some point in time in history have been knocked down. None of them come at the time of the story in the Bible. They have never been able to locate that set of walls that is supposedly from the Bible. This is actually the oldest man-made structure on earth, and it was supposedly a house of some sort. Again, we were not able to get down there to see exactly what it was, but you can kind of see where they're digging around the area, and then they already have the one location that has been excavated. This is overlooking the city of Jericho right towards the Dead Sea. And one of the things that you can see from this vantage point is you can see how low the Dead Sea actually is, and then all of this land rises up around it. When we were talking about Masada, we were talking about the area of Masada. Masada is on further to the south from where we are right now in Jericho. So this is the northern end of the Dead Sea if you're looking at your maps that you have at your table. But you can see all the greenery that is located here. And water plays a very important role in their agriculture system, because most of these Palestinian territories and some of these locales are what is called a kibbutz. And a kibbutz is really an area that is self-sufficient. So they share in everything from an agricultural standpoint. So whatever the kibbutz creates, the people share in that, and then they use that also to make money for their area to bring in other items. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but every house has a water cistern on the roof. And as you go around Israel, in the Israeli territories, they are silver, and the Palestinians are black. And it's all because they use different water systems, or they are controlled by a different governing authority. And you can imagine in the summertime, in an area like this where it's quite arid and dry, water becomes very important. And this is where they have a problem. Those water cisterns that you see on some of these houses may hold enough water for a week. But if you don't get water within that week, you're having to really conserve your water to make it through that week. And you may go several days without water before the cisterns are refilled by the water system. At the top of the Mount of Temptation, there is an overlook area, and this is one of those panoramic views with the iPhone. So it just kind of gives you a full view of the city of Jericho. And you see the Dead Sea is off to the right. The mountains across the way are actually in the country of Jordan. That's on the opposite bank of the Jordan River. And then all of this area here is the farming area and all of the greenhouses that they have in that area for the kibbutz of Jericho. One of the neatest things in this area, because this is traditionally held as the area where Christ was tempted by the devil. And we say traditionally because there's really no way of knowing. There are no clues in the Bible. There's nothing been found in any records anywhere that says this is the actual place, but it's traditionally held as the place where Jesus went to be tempted by the devil. They built a Byzantine monastery inside of the hill. Now, we're approximately 1,200 or so feet in the air. Can you imagine building something of that type in the 400 AD range for something of that nature? Now, this is not the original structure. This actually has been rebuilt by the Roman Catholic Church and is still in use today. And this is just another picture of it where you get the full view as you see that it just wraps around the entire side of the mountain, is built into the side wall of the mountain. Over here to the left is actually the area where our God was telling us in amongst these caves that they feel like Jesus spent his 40 days fasting. We're in and amongst the caves here in the mountain above Jericho. Part of what was a treat for everyone is that in Jericho, there was this gentleman that had a camel shoo-shoo, and shoo-shoo would give camel rides. And so shoo-shoo was a very loving camel, and one of the costs of doing a ride with shoo-shoo is that shoo-shoo had to give you a kiss afterwards. Now, I did not get a picture of that, and I apologize for that. Yeah, this is Pastor and Kim on the camera.
If Kim gets credit for the camera picture, the screensaver for that one is Shusha though. Don't let her ride with the train. That's a different camera.
That's a different camera there. Okay. And then I took this picture as we were leaving Jericho, and I just thought it was a really pretty picture. It's the same. It's a mosque as you're leaving the city that just at dusk had just a really beautiful look to it. So just in case everybody missed it, I put the pastor riding the donkey in here again. So the Dead Sea, these are some pictures from the Dead Sea. And so these are the mountains on the Israeli side of the Dead Sea. And then over here on the left-hand side, we're looking out across the Dead Sea, and it was very hazy that day, so you could not see the mountains on the opposite bank, which is actually in the country of Jordan. But it's a very picturesque area, but it's also an extremely dangerous area. And the pastor will talk a little more about dangers that is associated with it. But down here on the left, one of the things that you can kind of see are some of the pools that are set by the banks of the Dead Sea. And those are actually sinkholes. And these sinkholes may be, tens of feet deep when they occur. And if you get caught in one, you can imagine that can be quite dangerous. The pastor will talk a little more about that when he gives his pictures on the Getty as to why some of these sinkholes are developing and forming in these areas. But the Dead Sea has a salt content of about 42%. When you compare that to your tears or to your body fluids, 0.9% salt. So it is extremely salty. In fact, if you swim in the Dead Sea and you swallow a bit of the water, you can end up in the hospital and quite severely ill, because it will just take all the fluid out of your body to try and dilute that amount of salt, because it is so salty. It is also the lowest point on earth that is above the ground. Now that's important because we dig holes and we dig cisterns and wells, and around here we think it's horrible if we have to dig a well 300 feet deep. The Dead Sea is 600 meters below sea level. So one of the major concerns in the country of Israel and in and around this area is climate change. Climate change can cause our water table to rise so high that these people could be flooded out, because this is the lowest point on earth. So climate change is a very real danger to them on a more global scale than we even think. The level of the Dead Sea, however, right now, because of the water situation in Israel, they're pulling so much water out of the River Jordan and out of the Sea of Galilee to use it for agriculture and for watering plants, and to basically provide water for the citizenry, that the Dead Sea is now dropping by a meter or more per year. And when you consider the wide, vast area of the Dead Sea dropping at a meter or more per year, and its lowest depth is currently 60 meters, it'll be less than 60 years and the Dead Sea will be no more at its current rate of decline. In fact, it may be more like 45 or 50 years, because it's like shrinking amounts of water in a bowl. The bowl gets smaller at the bottom than it is at the top. Our group did get a chance to swim in the Dead Sea, or put your feet in the Dead Sea. Angie and I did not partake in this, but I think Kim
I put my feet in,
put
I
your
wasn't
feet in.
helping in 50 degrees.
Yeah, it was quite chilly that morning when we left Jerusalem to go to the Dead Sea. We were like, no, I'm not getting in that cold water. But others did, and they enjoyed it. And the Dead Sea, because of the high salt content, all you have to do is just sit back and you float automatically. There's no learning to float, you just float. This picture here really gives you an idea of the scope of the water loss. Up to the left-hand side, you will see a dock or a pier. This was the original level of the Dead Sea before they started pulling off all the water for irrigation. And so boats would be docked up there on that pier. And now you see where the Dead Sea is located today. That's the amount of water loss over the last 50 years. There's a small platform that is located right here. So this small square platform is located over here on the right. That was at the sea level 10 years ago. In the next picture, this fence line is where it was 3 years ago. So this, when you start looking at this and you start seeing these pictures, you just get this oh my gosh feeling, because you can really get the sense of the amount of loss that this area is seeing around this.
Jason, what's their average rainfall? Is it on target or is it lower?
Well, I don't know, Leanne. The indication is that their average rainfall continues to be on the same, but their population continues to grow. Their agricultural needs continue to grow because the date palm, which is not necessarily native to Israel, is one of their major agricultural productions and requires a lot of water. This was actually brought in from the area of Iraq, and it thrived in the area of Israel and has become a major market for them. So from an economic standpoint, they can't necessarily back off of utilizing it, but it is a water hog when it comes to needing irrigation.
Well, oranges do it too, right? All the oranges.
But the tangerines are native to the area. The other big crop here is also bananas. So there are huge areas of bananas, and you drive down the road and they're all covered in netting to keep the bugs out of them. And they have what are called blue bananas. Angie's giving me the smirk. The blue banana is actually, they put blue plastic bags around the banana bunches to protect them and to help them ripen. They just call them blue bananas. So this is why they're losing a lot of water. Plus, there's a major market for dead sea salt cosmetics, facial creams, and sea scrubs that they have these large companies that come in and they pull off these huge amounts of water and harvest all the salts to then produce all of these products that they're selling worldwide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the pastor. Unless y'all want to see mine donkey.
So we're still talking about the area of the Dead Sea. Now, one of the things that you might be aware, you've heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls. So those are in an area called Qumran. And Qumran is also, if you're looking at your map, on the north end of the Dead Sea, just a little ways to the west of the Dead Sea. From Jerusalem to Qumran is about 20 miles. So one interesting thing is if you saw some of those images, and we'll show some other stuff, the Jerusalem area is up in the mountains, very high. The distance, it's all downhill to this area where Qumran is at, and then Qumran is in that Dead Sea. This is an image on the way from Jerusalem to Jericho, to the Dead Sea, all of that. Now, I just wanted to show, and you might have seen something similar. You've gone from the mountains, you go into this arid, really, really arid, dry area, from those areas that had, trees and grass. This is just a view from the road that we're driving by. But it gives you a sense of the barrenness of this kind of an area as it keeps going down and down and down to 1,400 meters under sea level or such. But when you think about the stories in the Bible of things such as the Good Samaritan and how he, saved the guy that was accosted by bandits. I think Jason mentioned earlier, if you look at the texture of the land, this is an area where bandits could go and just hide on the other side of the hill. Same thing with people that were fighting the Romans and such. Until you had the ability to get in the air and see people, they could just hide and go through these little valleys all over the place. But it's not just that. It's also the question of water. If you're out in these areas and walking, and one thing that we didn't mention is Jericho. When we were there, Jericho was cool. It was probably 50s or so, 50 to 60 that day in Jericho, and this was in January. Jericho is where people go in the winter because it's the warmest place around. In the summer, they don't go to Jericho because Jericho can be 120 degrees in the summer. So you put together the lack of water, the heat issues, and there's no shelter. So this really becomes an area which is very barren. But that takes you to this area called Qumran. And wanted to start with, when people think of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is an image from the Israeli Museum, and it's a sum of the different pots that some of those scrolls. Now, what you've got is you can see the dark elements of those is the original pot material. They've recreated it, molding new material around it. But what those pots were, these were where scrolls were originally placed and then managed to stay there for almost 2,000 years in a cave. A cave in the area of Qumran. Now, this is an aerial image. We did not take this because we weren't up in the air, but I did get this off of the internet. But it's a good image. What you have with this is a general downward-looking view on the community of Qumran. It's right up next to the area of the Dead Sea. You can see how arid it is. What you've got there is the whole community has things such as down in one corner. Down in the right-hand corner, there is a great big round cistern where they have water. There's a whole bunch of pools where people would, a ritual, almost like a baptismal pool. We think of it as baptism that you go once. They had a whole ritual of going in once or twice a day to go into the pool and come out of the pool. It was a ritual cleaning. There's all sorts of other material which is here, which was excavated. And that's been there. The Qumran community goes back to about 100 years or so before Jesus and continues. And then effectively died out about 70 AD, so it was 100 years before Jesus, 70 years afterwards. And then occasionally Bedouins and others would come in this area. There's a longer history, but no real development, no real community there, just kind of passing by folks that would be in there over the next 1,800 years. But a really neat place, and now there's walkways and things like that, so they have a little sort of a tourist location, a little bit of history thing that's not shown in this image. But this cave, this is an important cave. This is the location of the cave where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found back in the 1940, 1950s. And the story on that you may or may not be familiar with was sort of happenstance. You had some Bedouin tribes that were coming through, and they were driving some goats or something of this nature through, and there's a small group of family. And evidently, what happens is there was a kid that was doing what kids do, picked up rocks and was throwing them because he was bored as they were wandering around. And he'd look at the little cave things and, these little holes and stuff like this, and he took a rock and threw it up there, and instead of hearing it it kind of went clink. And kind of stopped. What was that? Well, he was the smallest one, so he actually climbed. They told him to go climb up. They didn't make the right sound. There was something that it hit. So he climbed up and was able to climb in as the smallest person. So the hole is bigger than it originally was. He was able to climb in, go in, and ended up, that's how they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. His rock had hit one of those pots and broke it. Whole long story, whole different thing. We went through the Dead Sea Scrolls with our Thursday night or Thursday morning group. But this is where that was found. Now eventually, there was 11 total different caves where they found stuff in. This was where they found the most. So some of them they only found little tiny scraps. A lot of interesting story behind the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves. But this is the area. You can see again how arid, how forbidding that would be. So this was sort of a monastic community that decided to go live out into that wilderness. And it was a hard life. Another aerial view, again, one we didn't take, of an area not too far away. So this would be a little bit further south. This would be between where Qumran is at and where Masada was at. But again, the aerial view shows you the Dead Sea there at the bottom, then these mountain elements that become a plateau, and then it rises as you keep going uphill, and eventually you're looking, from this point, you're looking west. But if you can take a look, there's greenery at the bottom of this hill area. This is En-Gedi. This is the land where David went when he was trying to escape at some point. This was, in the scriptures, this wonderful oasis in the middle of the arid wilderness. Now, if you've heard a little bit about Jason talking about the water issues and here, can you imagine you have been out in this dry, arid, rocky wilderness, and all of a sudden you come effectively around a corner or look down from above on one of these hills, and you have this kind of environment. Beautiful, water-filled, gorgeous oasis. Spring-fed, clean water, living water. Remember those phrases in Scripture? Living water is moving water. Anywhere in the world, just like anything else, if you have stagnant, dead water, that's both dangerous, it's not good to drink, but this is good living water. It was a wonderful spring. However, good things can get overused, as maybe the case may be. So there is now a kibbutz, as he mentioned. It's a community sort of communal, kind of like a commune, kind of not. There's a community called the Kibbutz En-Gedi. And it's been around for about 50 or 60 years. It was one of the ones that was originally started soon after the 1948 establishment of Israel. And they have built a resort there. This is an image of their resort, and they've got pools, and they've got buildings, and they also have started, and quite a while ago, they started bottling the water in Gedi. And one statistic I heard was they were bottling in the vicinity of something like 700,000 gallons of this. That's just the sheer amount of volume of water that they were pulling out. Well, that contributes to some of this problem, because the more people that they have there that they're trying to do and have their own agricultural areas, and they're trying to pull out of the spring, pull out of the little creek and the material that comes through here, and bottle it and send it away to sell it to somebody. The side effect of that, of course, is the water is not moving into the Dead Sea. It's simply getting slurped up and sent somewhere else. Which, if you add this up with the Jordan River, with everything else, this is all where water doesn't go into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea keeps going down. There was, in the early 2000s, a whole move, even in Israel, to try to boycott this company that was selling this water and trying to legislate issues to try to say stop. Because it's destroying this cultural, historical landmark. It's simply sucking all the water. And then even if they stopped that, could they drill wells? Well, you're familiar with groundwater. What little groundwater there is, if you just drill wells and say, well, we won't take it from the spring, we'll just take it from the well. You're doing the same thing. You're taking that groundwater away. But difficult questions. Where do they live? What do they do? How do they do this? Not easy to answer those questions. Which brings us to sinkholes, which Jason mentioned. One of the Dead Sea water issues sinkholes were unknown until the 1980s. In 1980 was the first reported sinkhole in this area of the Dead Sea. By 1990, there were 100 reported sinkholes. By 2017, there are 6,000 reported sinkholes, and some of them are up to 50 meters in diameter. Half a football field. Sinkhole. We saw an image of, for example, there was a hotel which is no longer usable because the hotel and all this development is on top of a set of sinkholes and it's just falling into it. The En-Gedi kibbutz itself has lost more than 75 of their arable acres. Again, we're in the middle of the Dead Sea, arable, you have to irrigate it and stuff like this, but they can't even go in there because of the danger of sinkholes. 75 acres they lost, just that one kibbutz. Water. That moves us to something else. A little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting in a different way. Now I enter what will be a reasonably fast run, and we'll see how fast that goes, but it should be a fast run of just tidbits of things, daily life then and now, throughout the land of Israel. So these don't fall into any one category, but hopefully a little bit of fun. Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the city by the sea. This is the nightlife. This is a lot of businesses here. This is the fast-paced modern city. So this is the image on the left of Tel Aviv from Jaffa during the daytime. Jaffa's a little bit further down the coast. The other one is the first night when we got there, we all went wandering down, and we're at the Mediterranean. So this is the city right on the Mediterranean. Again, very cosmopolitan, very contemporary, a wide selection of different folks that live there and kind of businesses that are engaged. So if I just showed you this picture, where are you? I don't know how well you can see that. But if you kind of look at it, we've got Columbia and Bogart, we've got Golf, we've got Foot Locker, we've got Office Depot, we've got Delta, McDonald's, the list goes on. One of the interesting things is language and modernity. Most of what we've been sharing with you is all these pictures of old places. Well, if you got that impression that Israel's all these old things, well, there's lots of old things, but there's also lots of new. And there's lots of English. Almost everything in most of these places is dual English and Hebrew and Arabic. It's amazing how many signs have all three. And you know what? We can sometimes think about language, and we know English and we know it really well, but if you go over there, what we generally found was that just about everybody speaks at least three languages. They speak English, they speak Hebrew, and they speak Arabic. How many of us know three languages fluently? An interesting thought, but it's a different culture, and they're all communicating with each other. Not everybody, and some folks weaker and stronger than others, but generally, the signs and everything else, and they're very cosmopolitan. And remember, the vast majority of the folks that are now in Israel as Israeli citizens, the majority of those have come from the United States. Certainly in the last 40, 50 years, they take English with them. Totally different. Sepphoris, ancient city, goes back a long way, a lot of history, but this is one neat image. Sepphoris is an example of a cactus wall. It's about 8 feet tall, about 10 feet wide. And if you think you're going to sneak in there and take their cattle or do a little bandit raid, I would not recommend trying to work your way through a cactus wall. It's very effective, and it's been like this for the last couple thousand years. They just build a cactus wall around this place. They don't need anything else. It keeps the critters in, and it keeps people out. It works. Next, as we traveled around, it struck me at some point that it is amazing. Almost all of the buildings are this sort of sandy stone color. Outside of Tel Aviv, but most of these, you just went around, and at some point it's kind of like, why are they all the same color? Why not? There's no variety. Well, it ends up that the British, during the British Mandate, that ended back in the 1940s. At the end of the British Mandate, but during that time they passed a law, which is still on the books. Everything has to be clad in stone. Now, you might do concrete, and then you put sort of a stone surfacing on it. So everything looks shades of sandy stone, except in a few circumstances. Let's move north. Back in the Golan Heights, we spent a lunch with a Druze family. So here it is. If you notice, people are sitting on the floor. That would be the traditional method that they do. They do have some sort of couching, but it's not like couches that are up as high. That's a really low couch. It's a different style of furniture and eating. Druze is in the Golan Heights. There are a total of about 25,000 people total. It's 3 primary villages. It goes back a long ways. But it's an interesting dynamic politics and everything else. It's a sect of Muslim, but it's a branch, kind of like we have denominations. So you probably have heard Sunni and Shiite, stuff like this. Well, Druze is a branch of Islam. But it's one that everybody else persecutes because they're heretics, you see. They believe in 5 prophets, not just one. They believe in reincarnation. There's a whole interesting background of what that is and how that works. And they've been persecuted by every other group of Muslims over the centuries. At this time, which is interesting, they're in the Golan Heights, and that just got in the news the other day because Trump said he was supporting the idea that the Golan Heights should be part of Israel. Bunch of politics behind that. Well, what's interesting for the Druze is that at this time they are technically Syrian citizens because it's simply an occupied area. On the maps, it's part of Syria occupied by Israel. They're Syrian citizens. They are Israeli residents. They're Muslim. But here's an interesting twist. When we start thinking about how do we understand people and how do you welcome people? How long does it take to become a citizen? If a Druze citizen, if a member of one of these communities applies to Israel to become a citizen, they become a citizen in 1 week. Nothing like, well, you've got to spend the next 5 years filing through paperwork and everything else. They can become an Israeli citizen in 1 week. Back down to the Sea of Galilee. Really quick little item. Tiberias. You saw a picture of it the other day, but what's interesting in terms of then and now, history and a little bit of a background. There's a Templar fortress. This would have been the time of the Crusades. Templar fortress. 300 soldiers. At the top of that hill is the fortress. 300 soldiers defended against Salahuddin's entire army for 2 solid years. Didn't get overrun. Eventually it was a negotiated thing. They let the Templars go and gave them safe passage and stuff like this, but they couldn't defeat the 300 Templars over 2 years. 1948, Israel was established. And in 1948, Israel evicted all non-Jews from the city of Tiberias. All Christians, Muslims, anything else. Anybody who wasn't Jewish was evicted. Had to go. It became a favorite beach town, nightlife, entertainment. In 2010, though, some interesting politics goes on. The Orthodox political parties got control of the government, the mayor, the city council, and everything else at Tiberias, and have now turned it into an Orthodox town. They're shutting down everything at dark. They've taken all the entertainment away. They've done all these kind of things, and all non-Orthodox Jews are being pushed out of town. Not just Jewish. You have to be Orthodox Jewish, or we make you not welcome. Different ancient place, Bet Shan. Neat place to visit, huge, one of the best set of ruins of the ancient world. It was one of the, Bet Shan was one of the capitals of the Decapolis back in the time of Jesus. You are standing at this point, we're standing on a place called the Carter, Roman Carter. That would be the main street. And on either side of the pillars, on the back side of the pillars, you'd have little market stalls and things like this. And right down the middle, as our guide Khalil is showing, that was a sewer line in the Roman times. They could take the stones off and clean it off and put it back down, and that's where they ran their sewage to get it out of the city. On the right-hand side was a really ingenious way to move a great big stone block. You cut the stone block, then you put the wheels on either side. You lift it up, you put the wheels on it, you lock the thing, and then you can roll it somewhere. When you take the wheels off again, you have a block. Ingenious method to move things in the ancient world. Another one from Bet Shan. This is the theater, and our group did sing there. But just gives you an image of the scale and the scope, and all those routes go all the way back up to that hill, down the hill that side. Off to the left-hand side, out of view, is this huge Roman bath complex, 80 meter by 80 meter Roman baths, with cold baths and warm baths and hot baths and all sorts of things. Other things changing over time. The Bedouin. We mentioned those as some of the folks that went through like the Qumran area. The Bedouin are the traditional nomadic herders. Biblical times, all the way up to the 1970s, and that's where things really started to change in the 1970s. But they would typically have sheep and goats. They'd be the source. As they traveled, they would take the sheep and the goats and the milk and things like that, and they would provide the markets to the towns. They were the traveling livestock. Because the towns wouldn't necessarily have it. This is a Bedouin community that we visited. The donkey ride was from this community. In the lower left, we'll get a little bit closer, but you can see in the lower left, there's some images of the Bedouin homes and community that are now in place. That's a better view. They're no longer nomadic. This gets into some stuff that we'll talk about a little bit next week, but in 1967, 1973, when some of this area changed to be in control of Israel, Israel started clamping down and said, you're a security threat. Now, there's never been any evidence of any Bedouin actually committing any atrocities or any attacks or anything else. They're just nomadic herders. But they're at risk. And they're also traveling, and they want to move places, and Israel didn't like that. So Israel passed laws, they can't go anywhere. They cannot take their flocks. They cannot travel like they used to. So they have to be in one spot. And what Israel wants them to do is move to the towns. But they're not a town people. They're nomadic herders. So trying to do what they can to keep their own community, not just be absorbed into some place like Bethlehem or Hebron or something like that. They're trying to say, this is who we are. What they're trying to do is continue to exist. But Israel has said, by law, you may not construct any permanent buildings. No permanent homes. You cannot build a building. No permanent schools. No permanent clinics. The Italians came in and tried to build a clinic, and the Israelis came in and tore it down because they said you cannot have any permanent buildings. And for a long time, they also didn't have any water, so they'd taken them away and fenced them off from like their original springs, and then the Israelis were kind enough to reconnect them to sell them municipal water. It's a hard life. And for them, they're trying to say, who are we? What does this mean? What does this mean for their livelihood? What does it mean for their kids? At some point, their kids are just going nuts and saying, I can't live like this anymore. But they're living in these sort of ramshackle things. But I'll tell you, they were wonderfully hospitable folks to us at the same time. An image from inside, this is one of these sort of tentitions. They did originally have tents they would carry with them and set up and take down. Now you have this thing that is portable, sort of. They could tear it down. Otherwise, the Israelis would come in and tear it down for them. But they could tear it down. It's not a permanent structure. And they served us some wonderful tea and some tasty things and had a neat conversation. This particular tribe traces its own ancestry back. They came from Yemen area in 300 AD. 300 years after Jesus, they can trace their own history as this traveling nomadic people back to 300 AD. Who's been here how long? What's the sense of our land? What's the sense of what does this mean? Difficult questions. But other people are trying to help them be creative. So if you can't have permanent structures and you're not on the electrical grid, what do? You get solar power. That's what that is in the middle of that. They are the greatest scroungers in the world. It's amazing the things that they figure out how to reuse, but they hooked up solar power so that they can get a little bit of power every day. Now, a couple other places pretty quick. Nablus. Nablus is the second largest city in the Palestine area. Neat old town. This is a soap factory. And up until just about 10 years ago, they were still using, off to his right-hand side was this huge sort of stone pit. And that's where they would mix this famous Nablus soap. Nowadays they do have stainless steel things and such, but they still use this for demonstrations of some of the history of how they've been involved in the soap business for hundreds of years, the same family. And kanafi pastry. This is one of the things that you could get as you were wandering through. Little bitty stalls in the old city, kanafi. Kanafi is a combination of cornmeal, honey, goat cheese, and cinnamon. It's kind of sticky, it's sort of roasted, really, really good. Really, really neat little pastry, and they just make it by these great big trays. Cut you off a little piece, here you go, and you wander off and eat it. The best example I could almost was sort of like a cornmeal version of a French toast with cheese and cinnamon kind of thing. I don't know how to explain it. That's as close as I can get. And a display. interesting to see how much things cost and all the different reasons behind it. But here's a whole row of beautiful dresses for women. The pricing on these dresses was anywhere from about $35 to $50. I don't think you're going to find that down at Concord Mills. Shopping. Shopping in the old market of Dallas. Open bags. You buy it by bulk. You buy it by weight. You notice that you don't have plastic shrink-wrapped stuff. You go in there with a bag. You fill the bag with what you want. They have little bags that you can use, but you're buying whatever you want by weight. And just wonderful selections, beans and spices and everything else. Hebron, another city in the Palestinian territories. Hebron glass. They have been making the same glass for 500 years. This is an example of Hebron glass. This is blown, hand blown. That's what he's doing there. They're making these. This is not painted. You want to come up and take a look at it. This is different colors of the basic sands that they figure out, and I'm not sure how they would do it because I think that they all get mixed together, but they get this swirl pattern. However they do it, they get this beautiful swirl pattern into that glass thing. And they've been in Qumran doing that for about 500 years. Haifa, high-tech city. This is the center of Israel's technology industries. This is where much of their research and development and things are going. This is sort of in the more northern part of the country. That's the bay. So there's a bay that comes in. That's one of the few bays that they have for that. So the Mediterranean is sort of back towards you. That's the bay over there. And just a beautiful view of Haifa. Food. On the left is a guy making juice. You ask for what you want. Do you want orange? Do you want pomegranate? Do you want something else? And they make it on the fly. They literally cut it in half. He's got a squeeze thing. He puts the cup underneath it and it goes like this, and you just watch the juice go whoosh. And he does 2 or 3 different pomegranates, and here is your fresh pomegranate juice. Wonderful. Healthy, good. On the right, I don't remember which dish this was. This was in Sebastia at a restaurant. So this is how we were treated for lunch. This is a meat chicken dish on this, it's sort of like a huge pita bread kind of roll, lots of herbs and spices. Wonderful, wonderful dish. Jerusalem. A few things real quick. Neat image here. This is a model of Jerusalem about 60 AD. Those are people in the background on the left-hand side. That's how big this model is. And it's the whole old city and the walls around it in that time again, about 60 AD. Jerusalem, the Israel Museum is really neat. Today, that old city looks a little bit different. This is an image of a skyline. So what's neat about here is you can see everything from a church to the Dome of the Rock. There's a minaret down here. There's churches. There's all sorts of things just looking across. But you also have all these modern things. You have the black water canisters that Jason was talking about. You have satellite dishes. So you have this really interesting mix just in the skyline of old and new. In the background on the left is the Mount of Olives. And I believe up there on that top, on that left-hand side of the Mount of Olives, is the Augusta Victoria Hospital that we'll talk about next week. A different image. This is from the Mount of Olives, looking over Jerusalem. Again, you have the Dome of the Rock. You can see older. You have some new things in the background. Hazy day. This is one of the days where sort of this sandstormy kind of thing was coming through. But you're looking at just a portion. You can see it goes all the way across, right there in the middle. A portion of the wall going around the old city. It is a really, really impressive sight in size. And right on this side of the wall, all the way across, is the old city's old Muslim cemetery. And this has got Muslim graves in it that go back 1,300 years. This side of it is the Mount of Olives. And this is the Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives, known as the window to heaven. This is the place to be if you're going to get married. Because according to their interpretation of Scripture, this is where the dead shall be resurrected into one different Jewish traditions, but one anticipation of Jewish tradition was this is where the first rising would be in the end times. 300,000 or more. No one's got a really accurate count. They're ossuaries, not full graves. They put them in, they let them dry out, they take the bones, put them into an ossuary bone box. And if you notice our prices for the cemetery versus theirs, at this point you can potentially still get a grave site, a tomb site. It will be $550,000 to $600,000 just for a spot to put your bone box. That's how valuable that little piece of real estate is. And in that context, you also better be Israeli, you better be Jewish, because otherwise you don't get it. Hometown favorites. Yes, there is Kentucky Fried Chicken. Or as some folks said, Kentucky Fried Camel. And then they have their own version, Arab Fried Chicken. It's just kind of neat to see. Somebody tried the Arab Fried Chicken and said it's not quite as good. We didn't have any conversation about that. I really have no good answer for that. There's some historical stuff from biblical times, but I have no idea how accurate that is anymore at this point. Three quick images here. You have the old city markets making falafel and a spice shop. The still image on the right is the spice shop. That is this is in one of these little tiny market stalls in the old city of Jerusalem. I mean, if you take a look, the whole store is about 8 feet wide. In the center is making falafel, and you can actually see how he makes it. It's almost like an ice cream scoop. Tosses it in, and it's deep fried. And that's the little balls of garbanzo bean and some spices and stuff. The other is walking through the old city market. So that whole alleyway is about 8 feet wide. And we're exiting that density, so it's now along cliff. Exiting the density, this becomes a little bit wider market fair moving towards one of the gates of the old city. But you can kind of see as we turn, and it starts to turn this corner, there's other folks that are just lining up here, and this is somebody who's selling fresh vegetables and stuff like this from sort of a base. Yep. Let's finish up with a few things. Christmas time in Bethlehem. Christmas time, Bethlehem Manger Square, January 9th. Beautiful place, just delightful. The other image is Christmas, getting ready for Christmas on January 17th in the Jerusalem Old City of the Armenian Quarter. I never really thought about this before, but they have 3 different times of Christmas in the Christian tradition. You have December 25th for Protestants, Roman Catholics, January 7th for the Orthodox, and January 17th for the Armenians. So they just keep going over there and celebrate all of them, but beautiful image. And that's it. So I know it's time, it's 8 o'clock, we went a little bit longer. I hope at least we didn't impact choir because they weren't here. But I do want to ask if there's any questions that if you'd like to say or answer a few, we'll go for that.
In the old market, were y'all, was it like the kind of street selling where they were right on top of you and tugging on your clothes? Or
I never had
were they very
anybody
well
being impolite
behaved?
like that. This was not like, sort of beggar folks and pestering. They were always polite. Now, you did have some folks had a little banter, trying to get you in, trying to contact you, but it was never had that kind of an encounter myself. No high pressure kind of stuff like that. Any other quick questions? Lonnie?
Is Israel, are they 100% self-sustaining, or do they import any goods?
Israel is a country, I don't have all the details on that. They have to import oil and such. They don't have a good, strong energy. Now, they're trying to move into other kind of alternative energies, like solar and wind power and things. But they do, I know energy is a major item because they just simply don't have their own oil fields and stuff. That's one item that they have to import.
What about food?
Largely self-sufficient. They have done a phenomenal job, and they've got a really highly advanced agricultural science technology development because of that. They want to be as self-sufficient as possible, which has allowed them to be able to figure out how to irrigate areas, for example, around the Dead Sea, and these areas that otherwise are impossible, and trying to redo things in areas that are desert and reclaim them, but that takes a while.
And as far as the modern technology, you have that, or they have a camel in front of a plow, or what?
No, the Israelis have, everything is modern, as modern as you can imagine here. It is, a lot of our technology stuff is developed over in Israel. Their military industry, computer industry, all those are extremely modern. Their agricultural industry is very, very modern. So, now, yeah, they're the largest exporter of dates. They've got a lot of science export. Now, it does change if you go to the Palestinian territories because of some of the limitations. In Israel proper, you had good telephone signal, you had high-tech, things like internet and stuff like that. You move into the Palestinian territories, and that became much weaker because of a whole bunch of political issues that we can get into, and who controls it, and who wants it, and who doesn't want it, and stuff like that. So, there you go. Have a wonderful week.